I paid the majority of the rent while my future mother-in-law stayed with us for free, all while insulting me every chance she got. When I finally decided to move out, she found out just how much I was actually paying and suddenly started wanting to be around more. I'm 29, and my ex-fiancé is 27, We had been living together for about a year and a half. My fiancé completed his undergraduate degree, worked for a couple of years, and then decided to pursue an MBA, which led him to move to our city. We moved in together after he finished his MBA. He's from the Midwest, and his mom has always hoped he'd come back there. When he told her he planned to stay here, she was devastated. I graduated with a degree in a STEM field and got a job with my current company right after. This is what brought me to the city. The company is a large international organization with offices across the US and overseas. I love my job, the company culture, and the pay is great. When COVID hit, my office closed, and we switched to working from home. Afterward, the company decided not to reopen our office, so I've been working remotely full-time since early 2020. I now make a lot more than my fiancé, mainly because I've been working for 7 years in tech. Before we moved in together, I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, and my office was set up in the living room. It worked fine for just me. When we moved in together, we upgraded to a 2-bedroom apartment, with one room as an office for me. Because of this, I paid 2/3 of the rent, while he covered 1/3. We split all other expenses 50-50ths. The problem. This past May, my fiancé's mom told him she wanted to move to our city to be closer to him. She asked if she could stay with us while she looked for a job and got settled. Since she's a teacher, I assumed she'd find a job quickly, so I agreed to let her stay, expecting it would only be for a couple of months over the summer. But it didn't go as planned. She never applied for any teaching jobs and has now been living with us for 6 months. Our relationship has become strained. She doesn't understand that I work full-time and regularly interrupts me, sometimes even during important work calls. She also constantly asks me for rides because she doesn't want to drive in our city. Her outdated views on gender roles make everything worse. She criticizes me for not doing more around the house. Even though my fiancé and I split chores, she believes I should do everything while he relaxes. The continuous criticism and insults have been exhausting, and I'm also tired of having my office crammed into a corner of our bedroom. The rent issue. Back in September, I suggested to my fiancé that we should split the rent 3 ways since it was clear his mom was staying longer. He told me she couldn't afford it, claiming she needed to conserve money until she got a job. I wasn't happy about paying extra for a bedroom I couldn't even use. After some back and forth, he agreed that we'd split the rent 50-50ths. I could afford it, but I resented the idea of funding her lifestyle. Whenever I bring up how unhappy I am with her behavior, he says he agrees but doesn't know what to do. He refuses to talk to her about the way she treats me or her behavior. When I ask about a long-term plan, he just shrugs and says, "I don't know." I've thought about giving him an ultimatum: either she leaves, or I do, but I know he'd resent me for forcing him to choose between me and his mom. My plan. One of my friends is losing her roommate at the end of February, and with our lease renewing in June, I'm seriously considering moving in with her. I can manage paying rent at both places for 3 months, as I don't spend much. It's not ideal, but it's doable. The problem is, if my fiancé and his mom can't cover the rent without me, they're going to be in trouble. But I just can't keep living like this anymore. I'm pretty sure I'm going to move out, but I want to know if people think I'd be in the wrong for leaving them in this situation. If you move out and pay for both places, you're just enabling the situation. There's no incentive for things to change. You should tell your fiancé that either his mom leaves within 60 days or you do. He's letting her disrespect you, and he has no idea when she plans to leave. Spoiler, it's likely never. I should have clarified, I'm on the lease at my current apartment, so I can't just leave immediately, but I can afford to pay rent at both places for the next 3 months until my lease ends. Why not just live separately and still date? Your work won't be disturbed, and his mom won't be kicked out, or find a small apartment for her. I offered to help her find a place and even suggested helping with her rent until she gets a job, but I keep getting the same response: she has to conserve money, which, by the way, means she's not paying a dime right now. Do you think this situation will end with you two breaking up, or is that already happening? Honestly, it's probably heading that way. Before his mom showed up, everything was great. Now, we're basically just roommates who happen to share a bed. I can't even remember the last time we had any personal time because his mom is always around, constantly watching TV in the living room, just on the other side of our bedroom wall. February 3, 2025. I posted here last week about my situation with my soon-to-be ex-fiancé and his mom. At first, I tried to respond to everyone's comments, but I honestly got overwhelmed by the feedback. First off, I want to thank everyone for their input, even the harsh comments, especially those. I needed some tough love to wake up to the fact that I had been letting both of them take advantage of me. The more I read, the angrier I got, but mostly, I'm mad at myself for letting this go on for so long and for not standing up for myself sooner. This past weekend, I finally got my ex alone for a serious conversation, which was harder than it should have been because his mom always tries to tag along whenever we do anything, but after going through the comments and messages I received, I knew how to approach him, and they brought up some things I hadn't thought to ask myself. When we talked, I gave him one last chance to choose us over his mom, not because I thought he would, but because I needed to feel like I had at least given him that opportunity. I told him again how unhappy I was with the situation, how it's affecting my work, and how his mom constantly interrupts me. I also made it clear how uncomfortable it was for me to be forced to work in a corner of our bedroom. I reminded him that I was paying most of the rent up until a few months ago, and it's my income that's been keeping us afloat because I make more than he does. He responded the same way he always does, agreeing it's uncomfortable for all of us, but somehow never taking action. I was furious. I told him how angry and disappointed I was that I had been paying 2/3 of the rent when his mom moved in, and how unfair it was that I'm still covering half when there are now 3 people living here, and she's the only one with her own bedroom. It was the same excuse, she has to conserve money, because she doesn't have a job right now. This led me to ask, what is she living off? I dug a little deeper into her finances and found out that when she divorced my ex's dad after he went off to college, she received a significant payout. Apparently, my ex doesn't know exactly how much, but it was enough to cover her living expenses up until now. She's been working as a teacher, but I was still left wondering why she's pretending to be broke when she clearly has some savings. At that point, I told him straight up that I'm moving out by the end of the month and that I'll only pay 25% of the rent from now on. As someone pointed out, she's got her own bedroom, while I'm stuck sharing with a man-child, so she should cover more. After I move out, I'm done paying for anything, no utilities, no food, nothing, only rent, and only because I'm still on the lease. I know his finances enough to be confident he won't be able to afford the rent on his own. If he doesn't pay his portion, I'll cover it, but I'll reduce what I pay in future months. The leasing office confirmed that since we both signed the lease, we're both responsible for the rent, whether we live there or not. The only way out would be if he signs a new lease by himself or with his mom, but I don't think he can pass the credit check on his own, so I'm kind of stuck. That said, I don't think he's stupid enough to risk his credit. I also told him I would find a place to work during the day to avoid her interruptions. My friend, who I'm moving in with, said I could work from her place during the day until I leave. After all this, I'm not about to overstay my welcome, so I'm already scouting other places where I can work if I need to. I also moved my important papers and valuables to my friend's place for safekeeping until I leave. My ex didn't take it well. He seemed genuinely shocked by everything. He was surprised I wasn't prioritizing his mom, and kept asking, what about my mom? What am I going to tell her? He even asked about the status of our relationship. I told him that after I move out, I need space, and that in a few months we can talk about things. But, realistically, I don't see a future for us unless he proves he'll have my back and set boundaries with her. I told him he needed to tell his mom because she isn't my responsibility, and that she'd notice when I start moving my stuff out. He hasn't said anything to her yet, but I'm planning to start moving my things this weekend. My friend's roommate is leaving for a new job on the 3rd, so I'll likely move in within the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when she leaves. If my ex doesn't pay his share of the rent or does something else dumb, I've got one last trump card. I'll tell the leasing office that his mom moved in, which violates the lease terms. Honestly, getting evicted would solve a lot of my problems right now, and it's a valid threat. Now that I've emotionally detached from both of them, I'm really curious to see how his mom will react when she finds out what's going on. If things get too ugly, I'll find somewhere else to stay temporarily, maybe a cheap Airbnb or hotel. Friends have offered to let me crash for a bit, but I can't take advantage of them forever. So, that's where I'm at. I'm leaving. and I'm no longer concerned about how it affects them. Hey everyone, I've been getting a lot of requests for updates, so here's how things went when my ex's mom found out about me not covering all the rent and moving out. Last week, I started working out of my friend's apartment, so I didn't see my ex's mom on Monday. On Tuesday, around lunch, she sent me a text asking where I was. I told her I was working and would be home late. She replied that my ex had told her I wasn't going to be contributing as much, so ex's mom had to loan him money for rent. That didn't surprise me, so I just responded with an emoji. I had plans with my friend and her roommate, who I'm also friends with, to go out for dinner and drinks. By the time I got home, it was already after midnight, and ex's mom was already asleep. The real fun started on Wednesday morning. I was getting ready to head to work from my friend's place when ex's mom stopped me and said we needed to discuss my financial situation. She went off on a long tirade about having to cover my share of the rent, calling me irresponsible for going out to dinner when I couldn't even pay rent, and how I was inconsiderate of how it was affecting everyone. She kept talking about how if she was paying my part of the rent, I needed to do a better job of keeping up with chores and keeping the apartment clean and organized. I told her I was moving out since, obviously, my STBX hadn't told her yet. She seemed almost pleased with herself and simply said, maybe that's for the best. When I got home that evening, she was ready to talk again. She suggested that instead of me moving out, we could get a bigger apartment, and she'd be willing to cover the difference in rent between a 2BR and a 3BR. She said we could go back to the old arrangement with ex and me paying 2/3 of the rent and him paying 1/3. Honestly, my brain kind of froze in that moment. It sounded like she was doing us a favor by offering to pay the rent difference, but the more I thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Apparently, ex had been telling his mom every little detail about our lives and relationship, but he never mentioned how much I was actually contributing to the rent. Once she found out that he wasn't paying for everything like she thought, she wasn't nearly as enthusiastic about me moving out. I politely told her I had already given notice to the apartment complex that I was moving out at the end of the month and had committed to moving in with my friend, but she kept pushing the issue, insisting that if she was going to help with the rent, I should just stay because it would be the best option for everyone. By then, I was getting pretty annoyed and told her that because of the way she had been treating me, I had no interest in living with her anymore. That's when she hit me with the best line of this entire dumpster fire. She said she was worried that I was taking advantage of her son. If I had told her about our financial arrangement, she said she would have been more understanding about why I wasn't keeping up with the apartment. I replied with something about how maybe the lesson here is for her to be nicer to people in the future, not just to the ones she thinks can help her. I even asked why she didn't help out more since she wasn't doing anything productive all day. She did not like either of those comments, and the situation escalated quickly with both of us yelling at each other. To be honest, we both said some pretty awful things. Finally, I told her I was going to inform the rental office that she had been living there, which violated the lease agreement, and that getting evicted would be worth it just to see her on the street. I grabbed my laptop and headed to my friend's place. I didn't even bother packing an overnight bag. The next afternoon, Thursday, ex texted me to say he'd added his mom to the lease starting the 1st of the month, and that she and his dad, I still have no idea how he got roped into this, would pay half the rent while ex would pay the other half. I confirmed with the property manager that I was officially off the lease and had no further obligations. I also made sure to get that in writing. I put in disconnection orders for the utilities under my name and told ex to call and set up the accounts under his name. I'm going to lose the damage deposit, since it goes to whoever is living there when the lease ends, but honestly, it's a small price to pay to be free. On my way home, I stopped and grabbed a bunch of boxes to pack up my stuff. When I got home, she was hostile. And when she saw how much I was taking, she got even worse. I ended up taking Friday off to finish packing, and on Saturday, I had some friends help me move everything to my new place. I'm going to pay my friends some rent for the next 2 weeks until the roommate moves out. They didn't want me to, but after everything I've been through, I'm not about to stay in someone's home and not contribute. Last night, ex and I talked for the first time since Saturday. He said his mom was staying until June when the lease ends, and then she's moving back to their hometown. According to him, she just didn't like living here, and that's why she didn't try to find a job. Then he asked how long I thought we should take a break. Some commenters gave me a hard time about stringing him along, so I was brutally honest with him. I told him I couldn't be with someone who let his mom treat me the way she did. I told him I hoped he learned to stand up for himself and set boundaries. He looked like he was going to cry before he just got up and left. As far as I'm concerned, this whole thing is over. I'm calling it a learning experience and being glad I found out how awful X's mom is before we got married. The thing that amazes me is the destruction she leaves in her wake and how completely oblivious she is to it. She destroyed our engagement and relationship, put X in a worse financial situation, and pushed back her ex-husband's retirement by who knows how many years. And she made my life hell for 6+ months, and she walks away from it completely unscathed. According to X, his mom is going back to her hometown and picking up her old teaching job. I'm thinking about going to visit my parents next week and working from their house. I want to tell them how drama-free their lives are and how grateful I am for that. LOL.